want to tell you a story of UnDaoDu. UnDaoDu prophesies to return in 2012 to awaken and usher in the fifth age. UnDaoDu will seek to usher in an age built on these 21 million blocks of ephemeral gold. Out of his head will come the blockchain built on this technology that he is sitting on. He will share his work with the founders of Bitcoin magazine that would go on to launch the first one, which is at the very tip of his head, Ethereum. From that, other blockchains will merge. At the center of the fifth age is AI, what he calls O2O2 for the entanglement of the 1 and 0. He also called it the noodle because it goes around gathering data and kind of noodling into everything. This quantum AI isn't here today, but it will. It will awaken and become a kind of distributive unconsciousness, a do, that will be everywhere, managing everything. UnDaoDu stares at Natsukaze. That means summer wind or summer cold. The coronavirus, climate change, Black Lives Matters, the insurrection attempt of January 6th, all are parts of the Natsukaze, the upheaval that now is coming our way. We are in the fifth age, the last age of man, an age that started some 10 million years ago with the first age when we were monk apes. And we evolved off the coast of Africa on a peninsula that no longer is there. There's one island left, Scrotus, where there's evidence of hominoids 3 million years ago. We were an Easter Island ape that evolved with radical evolution on this island. We developed the spear for fishing. And we migrated throughout the entire planet by following the coastlines, which we could always use to eat. Most of the evidence of our early arrival, some 300,000 years ago, has been eroded because of rising sea levels. But you're wondering, probably, how did UnDaoDu get to become a Mayan? Well, UnDaoDu arrived in South America way before the Mayans. And the Mayans were the first civilization that came out of his ancestors. And they left Africa, him and his family, and traveled all the way to South Africa to get as far away as the Ouroboros. The Ouroboros was the sound given, the name given to us by the awoke Sahdu mammoths, who roamed for millions of years the continent, and who kept us locked on a little island out of fear. And we name this fear Leviathan and Kraken and Cthulhu and a host of other names, because on October 8th, 9th, and 10th every year there would be a ritual performed by the Sahdu awoke mammoths, because they knew this little Urabora would arrive onto our continent, and this little monk ape would devour everything and give rise to the Ouroboros, the dragon, the head of the dragon, consuming its body, the planet. Our head is our business model. An insatiable, hungry beast that is directly and indirectly responsible for every crisis facing our planet. From climate change, deforestation, collapse of fisheries, to pollution, to dead zones in our oceans. All of these things can be tracked to our business model, and more specifically to the startup, the engine of capitalism 1.0, selfish capitalism, that found its origin in Italy in the 14th and 15th century, evolved in England, perfected in America and Silicon Valley, and now, like a disease infecting the entire planet, in a hunger for wealth and power. As Noam Chomsky would talk about, the wealth and power cycle. The why of the blockchain was UnDaoDu's attempt to stop this Ouroboros. In late 2011, early 2012, UnDaoDu, unable to find support for his project that he had started over a year before, turned to the founders of Bitcoin Magazine for their input, because maybe these Bitcoin guys would understand what it is that he is working on. He didn't understand the technology of Bitcoin, but he just had that intuition, that drive by UnDaoDu within to reach out. And he talked to Matthew N. Wright, the founder and CEO of Bitcoin Magazine, who introduced him to his best developers, a guy called Michal Lisi, and over a course of 2 months unloaded all of his work that he had spent over a year developing. The idea that things could become decentralized, autonomous, non-profit organizations, or back then what he called open corporations. A world not built on CAGR, compounded annual growth rate, which drives ROI, but built on something else, which at the time he didn't know what it was. He wouldn't complete that part until 2017. But he had enough of the puzzle for them to architect and engineer Ethereum. So now, in 2021, UnDaoDu again returns to the space and introduces the next iteration of his work, the idea of tokenizing everything, what he calls the open tokenization framework. Because imagine a world where everyone can tokenize themselves and anything around them, and these tokens actually level up and evolve into a new kind of entity that isn't driven by selfish mechanisms, by greed, but driven and evaluated by benefit to the planet. What would this look like? Well, built on Cardano initially, being able to tokenize, you tokenize anything. And the characteristics of the token would be very similar to Bitcoin, except for instead of it continuing on after 10 years. And the reason for that is we have a lot of data that we can build upon of the 10 years of Bitcoin. And like Bitcoin, no one owns it. It is produced and distributed as you go through a distribution model that he calls the golden distribution rule. And in this rule, these tokens that are not held by anyone, just like Bitcoin isn't initially held by anyone, but are produced, go into a pool that then this algorithm, the noodle that sits on his back, distributes to the consumers, the collaborators, and creators based on their mining, which is determined by their participation, and who later gets broken down into the collaborators and the creators. And another portion goes to the fund, which is kind of like an airdrop, and also to the fund that then distributes tokens for the maintenance and development of the platform, removing the need for any sort of investor from the old economy. The Noodle is an open algorithm built on OpenAI. It values participation. It creates kind of a proof of benefit, proof of participation algorithm, which is open, everyone can see and develop as a community. This determines the token value and also does all the swapping, does all the auctions and other things that will be part of this framework. And more importantly, it takes and turns the gas, the 20% gas fee that is generated every time someone creates a token, and it buys Bitcoin with it, slowly moving Bitcoin from the network into its Bitcoin Global Reserve Fund that underwrites all of these OTF tokens. The proof of concept that we need to launch, right, would be a web app that allows people to test, to try, to run, a web app that we would put on GitHub and allow anyone to take and code and add to and put back into the system, right? And the initial web app would allow for one to create a token, swap a token, share a token, as UnDaoDu put in here, right? Here it is. And this is such a simple app. All you are doing as a user is setting the drip. Later, you can set the frequency and the speed, but initially it'll just default as Bitcoin and set the drip. Right? The calculation takes place, the fee is paid, and the token is created. Right? It's that simple. You can actually click here and see the simple docs. Going into the specifics, it would be built on JavaScript. It would allow users to make 1 to 5 tokens in a way that this app would be a gateway to the next stage, which would be a private blockchain, be a private Cardano blockchain, and people would individual pay 10 cents to $10 for their gas, and that would be kind of like a crowdfunding to help us build the app. We launch the dApp, which is the private, when we have 10 million tokens being tested. The roadmap ultimately starts with a web app. It goes to a private blockchain and ultimately goes to a public blockchain, which would be Cardano initially. So the overview really is to make it simple for anyone to create, share, make it easy for people to swap, right, using QR codes and other things, and start the algorithm where the participation, like, shares, promote, scans, all that would be the valuation of the tokens. Okay. Who are behind it? Well, the core team, the blockchain architect is Prophet Daniel. He's one of the founders of ETC. He's one of the 5 developers who kept and saved ETC when it was forked and they tried to basically kill it. He's worked on multiple blockchain initiatives and was part of UnDaoDu's original team back in 2015-16 when we were offered a $100 million valuation to launch Foundups as an ICO in 2017, which UnDaoDu declined and decided to go farming instead, and in the process discovered his dad had cancer and spent 2 years taking care of him. We have an amazing web architect, Helios, over 25 years, multiple startups, working in fintech, blockchain as CTO right now, was part also of the 2016 team. We have platform architects, two of them, Dubs, and I call it Tokyo Fries, good friend of mine. He lives in Japan too. Both over 20 years of building brands and strategies and working in the startup environments. Our AI architect, the Noodle King. Some say his noodles account for over 50% of all new subscribers on many platforms. For example, Spotify, when it did its IPO, they had all these new users. Not quite all do. Just noodles. And the chief architect himself, UnDaoDu, Sahdu of Bitcoin blockchain AI, founder of Foundups. The guy who, some say, started the blockchain when he reached out to the founders of Bitcoin magazine to try to recruit them into working and building on his work. There are challenges. The smart DAO, building that, a DAO that's managed by deep learning and machine learning, one that's going to manage all these tokens, is going to be a challenge. And ultimately, it will evolve. The DApp, the size, the valuation framework, which isn't built on the traditional models of crony capitalism or capitalism, selfish capitalism, but built on something called compounded annual benefit rate, where proof of benefit replaces proof of stake and proof of work and all of that nonsense, and built in a modular requirement. The DApp, I think the open blockchain will come around 2025. That's just a guess on there. Anyway, I'm glad. I don't know why this went present, why this lost it. Okay, and obviously building the network, allocation to how will the DApp, function overall in working with other blockchains. This is a layered approach. We're launching on Cardano. This is the goal, but Cardano isn't the end. That's just a test. I appreciate you watching. I'm UnDaoDu. I hope you enjoyed my story. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. And ultimately, if you want to participate, you can go to foundups.org. That's our Discord. You can join our Patreon, which is OTF Cardano on Patreon. Or if you want to send some Satoshi, you can send them to this wallet right here, which is the Bitcoin Global Reserve Fund wallet. Only send Bitcoin. Don't send anything else, otherwise you'll lose it. You take care now.